Attention Silver City residents, this is Silvacity Dude with another video, and I'm here not to talk about constitutional silver such as these, because as any regular stacker knows, you can pick up this type of constitutional silver from just about anywhere. So in this video, what I'm going to be talking about is the types of constitutional silver that you can't buy. Stay tuned.
Yeah, Betty. I'm the coolest. How much is this?
Do you know anything about ethnic art? Have you ever been in a store like this? See, we don't put price tags on our merchandise. So if you have to ask, then obviously you can't afford it.
In that case, I'll take two of them.
I don't want you all to get the wrong idea and think that I'm some sort of rich fat cat who has access to some form of silver that the rest of you all will miss out on. My purpose is actually a lot more benign. I had the opportunity to go to the White House and the State Department, and while there, I was able to witness some forms of silver that has been around since the time of the Constitution. The first two pieces I want to show come from the White House Visitor Center. These are pieces that the general public can attend for free, even if you don't have an opportunity to go to the actual White House itself. You will be able to see fine pieces like this. This piece in particular, although it isn't technically constitutional silver, is a beautiful piece. This piece is not technically constitutional because First Lady Julia Grant acquired this in 1876. Regardless, you can look at the intricate details and the craftsmanship and clearly tell, as the old adage goes, they just don't make them the way that they used to. For you fans out there of English literature and poetry in particular, this piece might be inspiring to you because it is actually based on Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem, The Hiawatha. And this poem was instrumental in mainstream audiences of the period to become exposed to Native American mythology. Before this time, it wasn't something that was commonly known amongst common people. I couldn't begin to guess how many troy ounces went into this masterpiece. One thing for sure, this would be nice to add to my collection if I could somehow. This next item can also be found at the White House Visitor Center. This was introduced by President James Monroe, and one of the interesting aspects to this piece, this silver masterpiece in my opinion, is if you remember history, the British burned down the White House in 1814. The White House wasn't completed after that destruction until 1817. This means that this soup tureen probably was one of the first items that was included in the new refurbishment of the reconstruction of the new White House. There are some things at the White House that just aren't meant for the general public to see. For this reason, I had to reference the White House Historical Association website. If you go to this website, you can go to an article called History in White House Silver, and it will give you a good rundown of some of the items that are kept within the White House. The first of these items is this French wine cooler. This is another one of those items that was brought into the White House after it was rebuilt when the British burned it down by President James Monroe. Another fine silver piece that you probably won't find too many people who are able to make these days. For those of you all who feel like I may have led you astray into some clickbait because you have not seen any constitutional silver that you can't buy, well, this is an example right here. These candlesticks were actually owned by President James Monroe when he was the foreign minister to France. Later, he ended up selling these candlesticks to President James Madison. Because I already showed you this soup tureen from the White House Visitor Center, I won't spend a lot of time on it. However, for those of you all who are looking for some specific information, then I have provided the following just for you. This next piece is absolutely beautiful. I got flashbacks of the crocodile hunter.
This is just beautiful. I just like to kiss her on the lips.
This detailed piece was just one of 129 others that President Andrew Jackson bought from Russia's foreign minister, Baron de Tulio. The style of this is neoclassical. I wanted to get a close-up for you of the dog head spout and how detailed that is. Look at this face. There just can't be too many people who can make something like this today. This next piece, again, is actual constitutional silver. This belonged to John and Abigail Adams. One of the interesting things about this piece is that George Washington, although the first president, is the only president who has never had residence in the White House. Because of this, it's possible that this silver tea urn was actually one of the first items that was in the newly created White House. So with this, I will end with the constitutional silver that can be found in the White House and start talking about the constitutional silver that can be found at the State Department. I won't assume that everybody knows what the State Department is. Right here, we have our current leader of the State Department, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, along with Canadian Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland. The State Department is actually the first executive department in the United States. This department was originally called the Department of Foreign Affairs, and President Washington signed it into law, and in effect this became the first federal agency that was created under the Constitution. Originally, the Department of State was charged with several duties, such as managing the U.S. Mint, being responsible for the census, and also being the keeper of the Great Seal of the United States. I find it fascinating that many of these pieces are made by Paul Revere. You know Paul, right?
Been had a little horsey named Paul Revere. Just me and my horsey and a quart of beer.
The redcoats are coming! The redcoats are coming!
Before the days of the Revolutionary War, when Paul Revere became famous for his ride, Paul Revere was known in his own right as a master craftsman. Paul Revere didn't just work in making silver spoons, silver cups, and bowls. Paul Revere also made surgical instruments out of silver. It's a fun exercise to think back in time to wonder, how expensive was Paul Revere's silver? Would I be able to afford it? If you look at it from this perspective, during the early 1760s, a child's silver spoon would cost you about 8 shillings. So people will want to know, what on earth is a shilling? Well, if you go to this website on the National Archives, it will tell you how you can convert old currency to current modern currency that we can understand. Using my example for the child's spoon being 8 shillings, 8 shillings would equal about $34.90 in pounds sterling today, which is $42.01 US dollars. If you convert that to the current rate of silver, which is $17.04, that would equal 2.5 ounces of silver today. That conversion would also equal the amount that a skilled tradesman at that time would get for 4 days of hard labor. So for many of the higher end silver items, if you went back in time, that would still be constitutional silver that you could not buy. If a coffee pot can cost more than it would cost Paul Revere to live in his house for a year, I would hate to imagine how much something like this would cost. In order to see this in person, you would have to go to the Benjamin Franklin State Dining Room in the State Department. But this knife box has 12 dinner knives, 4 lunch knives, and 36 dessert or cheese knives. In fact, this is only one of 2 known to exist in the world. And this is what I would consider constitutional silver, since it was created around 1797. As you can imagine, all of this constitutional silver hasn't always been at the State Department. In fact, these diplomatic reception rooms didn't even begin until 1961. Before then, it was just a modern structure, but it didn't have the diplomatic feel that people felt was necessary for a world power such as the United States to receive its guests on an international stage. One thing for sure, there's enough constitutional silver at the State Department to put me at ease, so I can imagine some of these foreign dignitaries who would totally be amazed and in awe at the array of these collections of constitutional silver. I was only privy to go to a relatively small part of the State Department. There are 42 diplomatic service rooms in total. They have some on the 7th floor and some on the 8th floor. I only had clearance at that particular time to go to the 8th floor. Just like the White House Visitor Center, it is possible for the average person to schedule a tour of the State Department, and you too can get a glimpse of this constitutional silver that isn't for sale. I want to give a special shout out to Uncle Sal, who inspired me to make this video based off of his video that he made, and I hope that you all check that out as well. So I hope you like the information that I presented in this video about the constitutional silver that you can't buy. And the reason you can't buy it is because they're stored in highly secured places. Looking forward to making more content in the future. Please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all of my viewers. Silvacity Dude out.